Okay, congratulations for coming so far. And now finally we're going to create the master material. And if you're familiar with the concept of master material, it's a material and we create it so complex enough that it can encompass a lot of things. For example, these meshes that you see here, a lot of meshes that we create are going to be handled by a master material. And I like to categorize my master materials based on the surface properties of them. For example, for opaque surfaces, I always create one master material. For example, opaque surfaces are really can be found a lot in nature. For example, this wood, rock, iron, anything that blocks the light, foliages, and things that use subsurface scattering. For example, leaves, grasses, foliages, skin, and those kind of things are create one master material. And then for translucent objects, for example, glass, a hologramic effect, or things like that, are create one master material based on the surface properties of the object. I create one master material. Then for now we're going to create one master material to take care of whole dock that we have in here, and later on we create one master material for water and one master material for foliages to make sure that we cover enough in this course. So how do actually we create a master material? The master material is an ordinary type of material. If we go to materials folder, you simply click create it by using this material. You create a material, and I always love to call them mm underscore, and it means that it's master material underscore something. For example, opaque, you name it something. And I always create a zero before the naming because it alphabetically puts it in the beginning of the list. So let's name this master material opaque. And in this master material, we're going to create a lot of functionality and make it powerful enough to answer a lot of our needs. And also, when we made sure that the master material is strong enough, we are going to learn some layering techniques. For example, creating some dirt to go in between these wood planks and something which happens in nature, or to create some general dirt to make these even more dirty and look used, and to offset and do anything on these master materials. And one of the easiest controls that I always create on a master material is, for example, taking the base color, which is a texture. Base color is always a texture. I multiply it by a constant 3. I multiply by constant 3 and put this one, put this constant 3 to be 1 1 1, because when I'm doing multiply for color, I do 1 1 1 because it stays the same. And on the master materials, I try to always keep the default, and the default is pretty subjective. In this case, multiply needs 1 1 1 to stay the default, and it means that our base color isn't going to change at all. So let's drag it in here. Of course, we need to give this one a texture, so let's go in here and search for the dock, and I'm going to use this one as the texture. So you see that this is the dock texture without any roughness, AO, metallic, and normal information that we created in Substance. It's pure color without anything. So if I try to change it, it's really impractical if I come in here and try to change it in here. For example, change the color to something like red and multiply this red on top of the color that we have, and always try to save it to get the result into the scene. So Unreal Engine has provided us with a tool called instancing. And instancing means that you create something in here and you expose it for editor to take use of these knowledge that you create inside Unreal Engine Material Editor to change it in the viewport and even in the gameplay. So to go for instancing, all you need to do is right clicking on this and convert it into a parameter. And let's call this texture for now. And I'm going to call this one, right click, convert it to a parameter, and I'm going to call it tint. So you hit save, and if you want to see the effect in the gameplay, you right click on it and create a material instance. And let's drag it to something like this. So you see nothing has happened because it's the same. So let's select it, and the material that you bring up is a material instance, and it's getting the information from the nodes that we created here. You see the texture that we exposed to parameter now is available in here to be changed, and the color also. So let's go in here and try to change this instance to see what happens. So I come in here, and on the fly, without really needing to anything baking, I'm changing the color on the fly. And of course I can change the base color to something else basically. And you can do a lot of things with this instancing, and we're going to use this in our benefit to all sorts of changes inside Unreal Engine viewport. Instead of coming in here, master material, change something, apply it, save it, wait to be baked, and then go and see. We want the faster iteration, and this is the way to go. So let's start, go and create something else. And for example, let's see, I create another multiply, and this multiply is good for darkening and lightening things as well. So I put the result of the multiply into A, and then bring a constant and put it in B. And this multiply, if I set the constant to be 1, it's going to be default. If I set it to be 0.5, it's going to be darkened. And if I set it to 0, we are basically getting nothing, because everything times 0, it means 0, and everything times 1, it's itself. So I'm leaving the constant to be 1, and I'm going to name it base color darken, for example. You really name it, to change the name to whatever you want. And another thing that I do is adding a bit of desaturation to textures if I need it. For example, there's a node called desaturate, and this desaturation, you plug the RGB in here and put the result in here, and then we need another constant, and this constant basically tells how much desaturation we want from this. 0 is the default, which means no desaturation, and 1 is the maximum desaturation that we can get it. We can make the image black and white basically. So let's call this one desaturation, and I'm going to set the default to 0. So let's go into the material instance to see what we have there. So let's bring this material instance, and now you see in here we have not only the base color and the color, but also we have the base color darkening, which is the effect of the multiply. We can darken and brighten the effect, and we can also desaturate the texture to make it black and white also, or to take some of the colors out at least. And this is basically how we go about it. And one good thing about this master material creation is that the sky is the limit. You can go how far you want without any problem. But one single problem is that you get a lot of nodes and you get a lot of wires in this. You see, this one is a simple control, really a basic simple control for the base color. And suppose that we are going to do a lot of manipulations for metallic, for roughness, for normals, for ambient occlusion. Every time we try to do a lot of nodes and wiring and things, will get really messy in the material editor. And you should really think about something like this. You have a lot of nodes, a lot of wires together being hooked up, and you really do not know what is what and what belongs to what. So we're going to shrink all of this down, all of this function that we have created, to a single material function. And this material function really helps you to keep your works clean and organized. And you really do not need to wire a lot of things. Of course, you wire things in the material function and keep them and use them as a prefab system in modularity to create master materials. For example, for these albedo colors, I'm going to create a material function and demo that. So let's come in here into my materials folder, and I'm going to create a new folder and call it function, and I'm going to put my material functions in here. So I love to keep my functions separated from master materials. So I you come in here and into materials and textures, there's a material function in here. So let's call this master material underscore basic, and for prefix I love to add a mat_f underscore so that I know it's a material function, and later on it's a little bit easier to select. So when you open it, it's basically just like the master material. It's like material editor, all of the functionalities are there, but instead of having this material attribute nodes, we have an output. And to make them the same, I'm going to create a material attributes, make material attributes, excuse me, I selected the wrong one, material attributes. So this is the make material attributes, and it's the same just like this one. It's the same as that, but you have a lot of options because material function by default really doesn't know what kind of material we're going to create, and it has made all of them available to us. But if you do not use something, for example, like opacity, it's going to be basically cut away by Unreal Engine, and that is not a problem. So I'm going to wire this into this, and we got our material function. We got our first material function created, and that is so simple and easy. So if you want to bring the material function and use it in here, you simply can bring a material function call. This is the node, empty node that you can summon the material to it. So let's search for mat_f. This is the material function that we created, and you see that it has a result, and this result needs to be fed into this material input. But to make that work, we need to click on it, and in here you want to hit use material attribution. So if you connect it to here, now you have created a master material that uses one material function. But because we have not really assigned anything, the values are basic. You are getting half roughness, half a specular, no metallic, and black as base color, which is the default one in material creation if you do not hook something up. So let's tell that instead of having these nodes in the master material level, we are going to bring these all into material functions so that every time we try to bring a material function, we are getting these as well. So I simply put the result into base color and save this. And you are waiting for the shaders to be compiled. And I really do not need this, and I'm going to turn them off. So let's hit save and let's see what happens. So let's go into the material instance, and you see the same material instances that we created there. I mean, these are present in this material function, and now we have only used a single wire to connect this material function to the material output here. And this is going to derive the information and give us these that we need. And you can change them basically without really any problem. You have the same controls and without any problem. The main thing is that your master material is now so clean and organized. And later on, when we try to layer these material functions on top of each other, we really have a clean interface instead of a messy interface, because we are going to create, for example, 3 or 4 different PBR materials and connect them to each other to make a powerful master material. And we really need to wire some things to make that happen instead of having a lot of wires to make that really impossible to look at. So one problem of this is that we are not getting really anything in here to change them. I mean, you can go and change them into material instance, but suppose that we are getting a lot of materials, a lot of material functions. For example, I'm going to copy this somewhere. We're going to create a material function that is worthy. So we're going to copy this. Excuse me. I'm going to bring a material function call and again bring this matf in. So if we try to mix these, for example, using the using material, it's easier to look for layer blend. Now let's search for material. So it should be somewhere in here. Right click and material layer, and these are all material layer blends that you might want to use. And the most basic one that we're going to use is this normal, for normal maps or things like that, and this material layer blend standard. And if you drag it in, we are basically able to mix couple of master material functions based on an alpha. And this alpha could be a texture, could be a vertex blending, could be a vertex color, just what we created inside ZBrush. It could be basically anything to separate these from each other. So we output the result of this one into the base and output the results of this one into the top and drag it in here. And let's say that we want a mix of those two. If we do not apply anything in this alpha, we're getting a mix between the two. So let's save it to see what happens. So if we go to the material instance, and this material instance hasn't changed at all. We should get a set of new nodes in here to be able to change the material for this one as well. But since these are the same, these parameters that we have added here are the same and the name of them is the same throughout, whenever we paste these, we are getting these errors. And every time we paste this master material function, we really are getting the same thing repeated over and over again. And if I try to change something in here, we are going to reflect the change in here as well. So what we are going to do is making these material functions a little bit more neutral, so that later on we can apply some things in here to make these master material functions customized, and every time create a new thing. So how do we do that? And I'm telling you, if you're only using this master material once, these are really fine to be. But if later on something like this happens, that you want to change something about this and something about this, so you need to think about it. And the way that we do it is bringing function input. And this function input is as the same as this parameters that you see here, but it's used for material functions. It has an optional preview. You can really leave this to be, and it has an output. So we paste this output in here, and we have replaced this in here. So for preview, I'm going to paste this right in here so that we have a bit of preview value. So you should have in mind that the type of function that it has created for us is vector 3, and this one is constant 1, a vector 1. So we need to change this one from vector 3 to input a scalar, so that it is only a single value, not something three colored. You have to have that in mind. We want each of these to be using their own functions, and we will learn that in the future. So let's hit save to see what happens. And now you see in here it has created a couple of inputs for us, and this input is the same as this one, and it wants us to put something in here to be able to customize each material function separately from each other. And this is the beautiful thing. We come in here, create a parameter, call it something, and create another parameter, call it something, and we are able to change these independently of each other. Although these are the same functions, we are able to change them separately, and it's a beautiful thing to really use. So let's go and create more. For this tint, I'm going to drag a wire out and select the function input. And if you do this, it's going to use this node as a preview for this, which is what we want really. We want the preview to be something default. And when you wire it out and bring in function input, it knows basically how to put the function to be most optimal for that. You see, this one is a vector 3 being converted to a parameter, and it has selected a vector 3 for us in here as well, which is what we want. So let's bring this one in here, and you should also have in mind that you should name these correctly. There's an input name. I'm going to select this and put it in here. And then also you can right click on this and convert this one to constant, so that it isn't available in material instance and we are only using this. So right click on this and convert to constant as well, and we are remain with this one. And this one, let's convert it to a constant and drag a wire out, look for function input, and you see it has now selected the scalar for us, which is this one. This is a scalar value and this is a vector value. And every time you try to drag something out, instead of right clicking and searching for function input, the default is the vector 3. But if you try to wire out and then search for the name, it's going to select the appropriate thing for you. So let's connect this one into the fraction and call this one desaturation. So let's see what we need. The name is alright, the name of this one is alright as well, and this one needs to be renamed. So I'm going to call this BC for base color tint. Okay, and now let's save, and we're getting some errors in here, which is fine and what we wanted. So each one needs an input. Let me really separate these for beautiful visualization. You see every node that every material function that we renamed here is now being presented in here. We want the base color tint, desaturation, and base color darkening. So on the right of the name of each one, there's an indication of what type of data that it wants. This one needs a vector 3, this one needs a scalar, and this one needs a scalar as well. And a scalar is a constant. You can drag it from by holding down 1 and clicking, it brings a scalar for you, and you can right click and convert it into a parameter. Now you are getting a scalar parameter. So I'm going to name this BC underscore darken and bring it in here, and you remember that the default value was 1 because we were using a multiply, and multiply by 1 means the default. So another one for the saturation, it's 0. Let's select it, right click, convert it into a parameter and call it BC desaturation. saturation, and for another one it needs a vector 3. You hold down 3 and click, and it brings a vector 3 for you, and the default should be 1 in this case because we're using a multiply, and multiply needs the default of 1 in every channel. So right click and convert it into parameter, call it BC, whatever you name it, but for this case we're going to go with BC and call it BC tint. And now this is a separate material from this because we are using some separate parameters to offset this one to be another material. So for this one as well, we're going to copy these and bring them down. And the first thing that you need to do is clicking on these and rename them to something that you understand. For example, adding a point, adding underscore 2 after all of those, because if the name of these two be the same, whenever I'm trying to change this, it's going to change this as well. So let's demo this. Let's undo the rename, and if I change something, this one gets changed as well. We don't want that, and to remedy that, we're going to put something after the name or before the name, or whatever you want to do to make these independent of each other in the material instance. So let's wire this one up, wire this one, and wire this one as well. Now our material is working all right. And although we have created only one material function, we have been able to create couple of PBR materials independent of each other using the same one. So for the alpha, you can use a lot of things. You can use vertex painting, you can use vertex color. This node is responsible for vertex painting and vertex color at the same time, or you can bring black and white data, for example a clouds node or something of that nature. So let's come in here and go in a starter content, and from the texture find something that has, yeah, this one is doing all right. So let's drag this one in the master material, and let's look at it. You see there are good separation of black and white data in here, and if I try to drag it in here, it's going to separate these two textures based on this value. So I'm going to bring a node texture coordinate, search for coordinate, and this one is responsible for offsetting the UV, multiplying UV, whatever you want to do with it. So I'm going to multiply this, and I'm going to multiply it by 1 because 1 is the default for tiling, and it's the default tiling. I really do not want it to tile. Of course, I did a mistake and changed the name to 1. I want the default value to 1, and let's call this tiling. Okay, and for adding some post effect changes, let's add a multiply in here, drag this one out, and bring a constant in here, call it cloud noise contrast, and I'm going to set the default to be 1 because this is a multiply. So everything is working all right. We need to hit save, and this is the most simplest form of material function creation that we explored. So to make the texture working, we need to click on here, and we are getting what we wanted basically. But if you look at, instead of getting 2 textures, we're getting 1. Let's go, and yeah, and that is because we didn't rename this and we didn't put a function input in here. So let's drag a function input out and drag this in here, and this one exposes the texture for us. so that we can use that later on. So let's hit save, and we are getting errors in here because it needs a texture sampler to be fed in. So let's bring a texture sampler, convert it into a parameter, and call it BC_2. Means base color for the material 2. Drag this one in here. And for the default, let's search for the default. There's a empty texture that is easy to use, this default texture. So let's copy this one and bring this in here, put it in here, and I'm going to rename this to BC only, base color for the first material. So now let's go to the material instance. So you see the default is showing up in here, which is what we want. So let's open this up, and you see this texture is showing in here, which we really do not want. Let's go to material function in here, and because this is a parameter, let's right click and convert to texture, or instead drag a texture out and bring this default noise and click here, and we have connected this one, and now it has removed this texture for us. This is a 4K texture, and we really do not want this repeated over again. So let's create our materials. For the base color of the first one, let's bring the dock, and for the second one, I'm going to leave it. I really want to see the changes, and you see now we have been seeing the transition between the two materials. We have a lot of controls, and to make these controls a bit beautiful to look at, I'm going to categorize them into their own categories. So let's come in here into material, master material, not the material function, and we have some cleanup work to do. So let's select all of these. So let's select this, and into groupings, I'm going to create a group and call it texture 0, so that we know that it belongs to the first texture group. So put this one as well. For this one, I'm going to create a texture 2 and put this one into group texture 2. Texture 2 on this one, and texture 2 on this one as well. And for this one, I'm going to place it in the noise category. It's just a name to find out our textures better. So let's hit save, and when we go into material instance, let's open the material instance, and you see all of these have been categorized into their own categories. We have the first texture set base color with the albedo controls that we added, and then we have the texture 2. The texture is here with albedo controls, and this noise, there's something bad happening in here. For the tiling, I didn't put it into noise group. It's none, not noise. So noise, this one is noise as well. Let's save it, and now these two have been put into the noise category. So now the visualization is better. We can do a lot of things and add more controls. For example, normal controls, roughness controls beyond this, and we're going to do that next. So let's check this. I'm going to offset the colors of the cloud noise. I'm going to make it darkened, or make it whatever you want to do. It's going to be this one being fed into the alpha. And let's see the tiling. You can change the tiling to make the transition to whatever you want, and we have all of the controls. We can make this darker, make the base color darker, or make it desaturated, Or for example, take this one and make this one darker. You see, it's really scalable material creation type that allows you to use your material and do whatever you want to do with them. So this is about material function creation and a material layering system as well. You see, after creating a powerful master material, we are able to not only change the transition to make them appear or disappear. We can change the tiling to make every control that we need, and we can change the colors of the individual materials independent of each other. Although we have created only one single master material function, I mean, we have taken two variations from that. And as long as you create the material function to be powerful, you're able to do a lot of things with it. So up next, we're going to expand on this material function and make it a lot more powerful and add controls about roughness, metallic, and basically anything PBR in here. So we start the creation process in the next chapter. Okay, see you there.